Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Jim Haviland, Chief Strategy Officer for Vox Mobile, and this is the online MTL for this great day to talk about TEM, Telecom Expense Management, and all the amazing things that are happening in that space that I know many of our members are asking about, not only about saving money, but also about many options that are out there as the telecom world, the mobility world, the IoT world, and pretty much all the endpoints on the planet start to merge into one great big soupy mess that can cost a lot of money if you don't manage it the right way. So we'll introduce everybody here briefly, and we've got amazing content, a really great panel today to give you some great insights. Remember, we do have, we're recording this today, so you will be able to share it with your friends and family later on, as I found to be very entertaining and informational. And we do have the Q&A open. Type your questions in as we go along here, and we will do our best to integrate them into the program or answer them afterwards as needed. So for those of you unfamiliar with Mobile Thought Leaders, it is a global, if not intergalactical organization of professionals working in mobility, all coming together to experience share around what they're doing to move their organization forward in their consumption of mobile, even as we change what mobile means these days. So people often say they come to Mobile Thought Leaders for inspiration and commiseration, which will have both of those things probably well represented today. Lots of folks all over the world. New website just soft launched, so marketing won't like the fact that I'm bringing it up, but it is live. It's a little slow at the moment, but it does have this great new feature that allows you to connect with other Mobile Thought Leaders to ask about projects, this concierge feature. Look for that. And best thing about Mobile Thought Leaders, it is a membership-based organization. The cost of membership is participation, so congratulations, you are all now Mobile Thought Leaders. Which is great news. We also have a LinkedIn group. We'd love to see you over there. All right, so now let's introduce today's panels. First, in the room here with me, high atop the Vox Mobile Tower in spacious downtown Independence, I have Rob Seaman. Rob, how are you today?
Good, glad to be here.
And Rob, I know you're representing the vast universe of TEM experience that Vox Mobile's had across many customers today without necessarily naming names. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's what I was told.
All right, we'll try not to do any name dropping. And our very famous speaker from AOTMP, Tim Cowell's here with us today. Tim, how you doing?
Doing fantastic.
Tim, are you out of the path of any hurricanes today?
I am. We're sitting right here in the Midwest in Indiana, and so we're just dealing with some nice fall weather.
It is nice to be in the Midwest where there are no hurricanes and precious few earthquakes. And Tim, I know people unfamiliar with AOTMP, and we'll go into some of your data. I mean, I really appreciate you joining today because you've got some amazing data and insights from across the industry today. And a moment about AOTMP for everybody?
Absolutely. We're an information services company that deals with fixed and mobile telecom management. We help both enterprises adopt our framework principles and then vendors align their solutions to those principles. We have a research practice in which we garner a ton of information about the fixed and mobile telecom management space and really specialize in understanding what the enterprise experience is and what the trends are for what it will be. So hope to be able to add some good context to the discussion today about what's going on with your peers.
And in keeping with good telecom practice, you and I have never met in person, but we've already become fast friends that are able to agree and argue quickly over telecommunications tools and protocols. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely.
All right, great, thanks, Tim. And then our extra special guest and star of today's show, Tara Pound. Tara, how are you doing today?
I am very well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Tara, thanks so much for joining. I know in keeping with being a true mobile professional, you are on the move today, so we will do everything we can to accommodate your you're changing coordinates on the planet as we have the conversation. Have you ever participated in a webinar before?
A while ago for Erie, for our district sales managers and branch offices. So once in a while we get to do that kind of thing.
Well, I'll still acknowledge you as a highly trained professional then. So great. So we'd like to begin these conversations with what we call a statement to generate some controversy, maybe. I think this is something that I offered, Rob, as we're putting this together, is that the modern practice of TEM is more about options and sourcing rather than about contracts and consumption. And Rob, I know from the standpoint of you, most of our customers, they're just starting to get into this world of the fact that we're shifting from this, really being about contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. As the game is changing and the cat's been let out of the bag of really having to sit down and monitor what that usage, what that consumption is, and really getting smart contracts in there where we're less focused on that and what makes the most sense for the organization.
And Tara, I know as a consumer of Vox Mobile's capabilities around expense management, most of our conversations are still about contracts and consumption, but I know for most of the folks I've been talking to about this, they're excited that we're going to get beyond just trying to save you some money and really starting to give more options and get to smarter consumption. Are you on board with that as a good trend?
Yeah, for sure. I think we got out of the let's conduct and get good contracts up front, and I'm probably losing you guys. I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay, good. A couple years ago, we've been with Vox for, almost going on 5 years now, and in the very beginning it was, let's get a good contract with the carriers and really look at pricing, and now we're really focused on how can we be smart and how we consume data and how we consume even on the device side, how people are using their devices, where they're using them. So it's we're all totally on board with that path.
That sounds great. So, and Tim, it sounds like it's maybe not so controversial a topic because I think you or I are in violent agreement on this one, aren't we?
Absolutely. I think that one thing I would note is that as you look out into the marketplace, there still are enterprises that have this thought that TEM is about contracts and consumption and everything else just falls in place. And so I think there's some education in the market space, but in terms of what the trend is, absolutely, we are in violent agreement.
Well, and I think that the thing that's interesting to me about this is that, and we'll speak to it here in a second, it's so much about maturity because people still enter the story, and I'm still shocked when I find out that a customer hasn't even looked at expense management yet. They haven't gotten around to it, and gosh, we got to catch them up on that because Gartner's already gone through having a magic quadrant about it, and then not talking about it anymore for the most part. So it should be a foregone conclusion, shouldn't it?
You would think so, but I agree with the statement that there still is a lot of education that needs to go on in the marketplace, and I think part of that perception is, quite frankly, driven on the mobility side by consumer practices. We're inundated every day with advertisements, TV, radio, magazine, and so forth. That wireless rates are going down, data is now free, or it's unlimited and included. And I think that there's this perception that since the cost demand is going down, or the price points are going down, that the expense management kind of takes care of itself. And I speak with many organizations that still have that belief, but they don't really understand how their organization is fully utilizing the mobile services. And to the point that Tara was making, there's a lot of different options and opportunities to improve and to manage the entire life cycle that maturing organizations are getting into. So while you would think it would be relatively common and boring to talk about even some of the expense management elements, there still is a large portion of the market that isn't there yet.
Yeah, I heard, and I got to say, Rob, my favorite quote from our CTO is when we talk about free stuff, it's free like a puppy. All right, so today's agenda, thanks everybody. So today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the TEM maturity curve. We've talked a little bit about, where are you on that path? So we want to be able to kind of let people know what the steps are from our viewpoint. We'll talk a little bit about some of the ways to enhance your TEM strategy. Even if you're just getting started, you might as well, run to where the ball is going to be as opposed to just trying to get started with contracts and consumption. And then we're going to look at some of the specific use cases as we do here with MTL, doing some experience sharing, what we've seen happen and what people have learned, and what their experiences have been. And as we have an opportunity here, we'll look at how Vox Mobile responds to what we see as the opportunity, as not just as a commercial, Rob, but also as an example of how we're answering the call.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about maturity. So Vox Mobile's been doing maturity assessments and then talking about the consumption of IT in terms of maturity for a long time. We've got a product called the Mobile Maturity Assessment that looks at all these categories within mobility and IT and scores you against these 5 steps that are part of Gartner's IT score way of looking at maturity. Level 1, functional. Level 2, enabling. Level 3, contributing. Level 4, differentiating. Level 5, transformational. And Rob, I know you participated in a number of these assessments with customers, and the most important thing here is not everybody has to go all the way to transformational, but chances are you're going to find a good reason to get off of the functional model, or somewhere in the middle of there is appropriate for almost everybody.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of times we'll see that if we're in a very structured or regulated industry, there's compelling reasons on some of these where they can't be transformational.
Right. This isn't going to, or it's not going to lead the most value for them to go all the way that way. The risk-value relationship isn't there. So that's not really where we're putting people. But I'm having people understand where they are on this path, and then coming up with a future state that makes sense for them. Being contemplative of it is really the point of the mobile maturity assessment.
And cross-organizational alignment, and this is where we all agree that we want to be.
Right.
Right. So we've made this decision, so let's not talk about the things that we aren't doing that are outside of our agreed upon future state.
Yeah, deciding what not to do is important as what not to do.
Exactly.
And so let's spend a moment here and take a look at this. This is kind of the portion of that maturity curve that is really dedicated towards expense management. And we don't even talk about it in terms of TEM. We talk about it in terms of asset and cost management, because I think that's where the entryway people get into this. And because if you're level 1, that's probably how you think about it. But it really is about all these things. And understanding how you're dealing with assets, with your carrier contracts, certainly that's part of it. But if you look at things like getting level 3 is that comprehensive invoice analysis, historical device awareness, approval workflows in place of auditing. You're really enabling the things you want to have happen in your environment. Is that a fair way of
Absolutely.
Yeah. So making that and so contributing, meaning that recognizing that Telecom contributes to the organization should be like a minimum boundary. Right? Does that work for you as well, Tim?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that the more involved you can be and the more structured you can be in moving towards transformational, the better off for the organization is overall.
Yeah, and of course, we would tend to think that as well. We have no problem finding reasons to push people to that, to understanding, the automation around reimbursements, self-service, and all of this. Risk and lifecycle management. I think as carriers move away from subsidized devices to helping people understand how to manage the risk of owning a very expensive device. I know, Tara, I know that's a big shift for you. We've been talking about this for the last couple of months. That's going to be a big shift for Erie, yeah?
Yeah, a really large shift, because our culture today is, we purchase the devices and we keep them until they either don't work or we're ready to move on to the next version. So it'll be long discussions, I think, on this topic.
Well, because, and Rob, the problem is it isn't just the cost of the device, it's the managing the life cycle, the movement of that asset, reconfiguration or figuring out what to do with it once you take it back from somebody. All those things are considerations that we have kind of ignored quite often when people talk about traditional TEM.
Yeah, and they definitely fall into that bucket. We tend to think of them or not think of them as part of TEM, but it absolutely is a core component of it. And it really comes down to what we start to see at level 4. Really, I always like the word. We start to see the word programmatic here. Right. And that's really what we're talking about is, we start
versus
to look
ad
at
hoc.
or I'm thinking about it when I have the drawer of phones and I can't fit another one in there. Now I've got these 80. I'm going to go through them. I have a process of what I do with them, but it's not managed as a program.
Right. Tara, do you still have a drawer full of phones?
Thankfully, no. We have.
Okay, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
The pile is getting smaller and smaller.
Well, because there's still outlying situations, but that's where you want to put your time as opposed to programmatically the things are going to happen. I got to have a 3% incident rate every month around this thing happening to my devices, and I should do something about that and have it be programmatic. And Tim, I know that it's got to be a big shift for people, as you talk to organizations as well, is just this notion of thinking about how I'm going to manage these mobile assets as a shift away from how I was managing my TEM expenses and the way I think about my carrier relationship. That's a major shift.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's kind of interesting, particularly on the mobility side, is that if organizations are taking their TEM practices around fixed and wireline services and just extrapolating it and saying, take out WAN and replace it with mobility, and now all of a sudden we have a program, they run into some major challenges. And part of that is that the rate of adoption, usage, consumption, new innovations with mobility often outpaces the time frame that it allows organizations to build their program, right? So it does become programmatic, and so oftentimes by the time they go through the processes of setting it up, getting it set, or getting it ready to go, so on and so forth, the next evolution or the next challenge is in front of them. And so moving with agility to create a program that meets the needs is still, is still highly, or is still the challenge and is still as important. And as you have on the screen today, I think that there still is a lot of this focus on cost savings being the driver behind TEM. And while businesses run on money and we understand the importance of that, right to the kickoff, I think that the point is that it is more than just contracts and consumption. It's more than just the cost. It's establishing that program that allows you to not only manage the asset, but also to use it as an enabler and hopefully a transformation agent for the organization overall. And thinking about some of these other perspectives that that come to the table, I think a few things. If you look at this and kind of frame it up against the different levels in the maturity curve, a lot of the elements here still speak to organizations being either stuck or hovering around levels 1, 2, and 3. Some of them are not even to level 3 to the point that was mentioned before. So I think that thinking about creating that full programmatic approach so that there is proactive management and there's not just triage from a technical, financial, and operational perspective is really where a lot of the folks that are, I'll say, excelling in their TEM practice around mobility are. That's where their head is, and they're able to drive forward and generate successes for their organizations.
And I think it's difficult and it's hard to get there because we're in this like staccato, right, where I have these different groups that own the separate units, and that's why it's hard to get to a program. I might have procurement in there, and then I have IT in there, and then perhaps I have finance in there, and they all have their own component of the program, and it's hard to get everyone to agree that this is one thing.
And they're incented differently on what things are important about it. But if it's managed well together, the thing we know is that, one, the new things you want to go do are going to cost less, and it's easier to move those things forward. It's going to be easier to get adoption and to be able to address the real delta in the program, in the business outcome, as opposed to just worrying about the operational stuff that you don't want to get stuck on. That really get in the way. The things we call the M gap is that all those management items, as opposed to the real innovations that clearly digital business can provide for almost everybody. And Tara, does this resonate with all of you, with you in every way?
Yeah, for the most part. I don't know how long it's going to take us to get to transformational, if we get there, because we have, like Rob was saying, there's a lot of disparate teams that, like our wired side is owned by somebody else. We have the wireless side. So getting everyone together to collaborate and be on the same path is very difficult to do. We're heading in the right direction, but it's going to take a bit.
Well, and Tara, I'm here for you every step of the way.
Yes, I know. I love you, Jim.
That'd be maybe more terrifying.
It's a different kind of motivator to get it done.
Yeah. Oh my God. I'll try not to bring it up anymore. So one of the things that certainly makes mobility different with all of this, and I know we've had some good conversations about this, Tim, is the fact that we call the 3 V's here. With mobility, it's volume, variety, and velocity are really making challenges, because ultimately wired TEM is almost boring at this point. I mean, a good wired TEM program, saves you 3%. Your billing's going to grow by 3% to 5% every year if you don't manage it well. Whereas with mobility, and we'll talk about this with some of our examples, you're talking about 30 to 40% every year if you don't manage it well.
Oh, absolutely, and a lot of that is organic growth, and we still find a lot of scenarios, or see a lot of scenarios where there's some initiative within an organization, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's 10,000 iPads that nobody really knew existed. I mean, somebody knew they existed, but nobody that's involved in managing the life cycle of them knew they existed, and that it seems a little bit odd to think that might just happen like that, but there are so many different initiatives, and mobile devices and services are so accessible to any line of business and to the different stakeholders that could be disruptive in the whole process as well. And so one of the things that I think is kind of interesting is, and to the point Tara made, getting all the stakeholders together, the different folks to collaborate, that can be a Herculean challenge. However, one suggestion or recommendation is having somebody that leads the charge to, be, I'll say, the data collector, or the information collector, and to work with the different units. And what you find is that as you go across an organization, thinking about what they're doing today, what they know they're going to be doing tomorrow, and what they suspect they might be doing in the future, when you start to aggregate all that information together, there are some commonalities to it, and there may be more familiarity, particularly in the volume and variety buckets that allow organizations to start to standardize some of their processes and procedures and programs. But left unchecked, or with the thought that it's not going to be monitored in some fashion for any period of time, it will definitely grow out of control and be a different beast 6 months from now than it was today. And the problem just continues for, gaining visibility and control.
Yeah, Rob, we see this plenty. I know we've got a large leisure client in a city famous for leaving your bad behavior there, where I know we've seen it across every group, every independently operated group has their own profit and loss statement, has their own initiatives around mobility, and their own ability to go out and spend money on apps and on devices and to deploy them, and together, what do we do? Find out later on is that, they're all connecting to the Wi-Fi, or suddenly the bill goes up maybe, But even more importantly, the consumption goes up, and the help desk calls go up, and the variety of calls go up, and we only learn about it much later on.
Yeah. And back to the TEM side of it too, that's if the bill does go up, because that's assuming that they didn't just go out and sign their own contract.
Of course,
right?
Yeah, of course they did.
And not take advantage of your buying power, which adds to that problem.
If you can sign, you can sign a contract. And I know I just talked to a client yesterday where we have a client with us today that we thought we were going to get 15,000 lines. It's going to be 20,000 lines, and they just found out. Like, oh, shoot, they're like, oh, look at it here, between the cushions, we got another 25% of our environment that we didn't know we had. All right, so I think we're once again in violent agreement on the fact that it's changing quickly, and the mobility is driving this, including IoT. I mean, to think about it, we're talking to someone today, Rob, you and I, that where there's actually an environment, they're talking about 500 million assets that all need SIMs. It's a boom for some carrier someday, but it's going to be a lot to manage.
It's a boom, but it's interesting, right? Though, but we're taking advantage of the cheap bandwidth that I have in there, right?
And ever present and available. All right, so let's look at some of the steps that we put together here to address this maturity. I think these were offered to me, so we're going to check these for validity, my friends here. So active management of communication sets, so stay current with the shifts in the market and visibility into problems. And Rob, I'll go to you first on this. So this is something that we definitely sell into, because we manage a lot of environments, this is something we can help people with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, visibility into the problems obviously is. You got to look at it monthly, right? You got to see what's important because it changes that.
It's got to be someone's job to look at it, understand it, not only for what it is, but also where it is compared against everything else in the market.
And that's exactly it, and goes back and bounces back up then to the market, because visibility into problems are generally going to be driven in mobility a lot of times by shifts in the market. I mean, they just go together.
And Tim, from your visibility, does this seem like is this a revelation for people when they step into this world?
I think the only revelation is, and this goes back to the velocity comment, it is the rate of change in the market. And I think a lot of folks that aren't actively involved in it, they may say, well, every 6 months to a year, when it becomes Apple season and we have a new iPhone model that's out there, that's when we'll take a look at it. But the fact of the matter is that the cycle of change, or the cycle in variables in change that can affect your environment, is actually 60 to 90 days. And so staying on top of it, there's a difference between being able to put your hand on it or still being able to see it on the horizon. And so not to be too melodramatic, but I always tell people that whatever they think the rate of change is, cut it in half and then cut it in half again, and you might be getting close to what the frequency is for staying on top of it.
And Tara, does that sound right to you? I mean, I think does your organization understand that, or do you have to convince them on a regular basis how fast things are changing?
We are pretty much well aware of the how fast things are changing, and we're trying to stay ahead of that. If I go back 2-3 years ago, I would say we were not even anywhere close to that. The way we look at the expense management piece of it today versus yesterday is dramatically different. We didn't even know what we were spending. We didn't know how many devices we had. We didn't know how we were supporting it. So it's we've come a long way since we've been with Vox, that's for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. And Rob, but that's not uncommon. That's really the story that we hear every day. Mm-hmm. People had somebody that was maybe looking at the bills and looking for the obvious outliers, but the active management, the putting it in context of the trend and also the market trends, that's a new thing for a lot of people when they get started.
Yeah, and I think it really drove, and I know Tara, as we worked with you as well, as it was so many other organizations. Once I then saw that total picture that I had together, I was able to make some intelligent decisions, right? So why do I have a phone? Why do I have in a hotspot? and a camera.
Yeah, rationalize across
right.
all that.
And now that I'm looking at it across the board, I can understand it better. I can get closer to the business and really do what we want to do in IT, which is solve the problems of the business instead of react.
Absolutely, and that really relates to number 2 here, because once I have that visibility, I want to be able to make some actions on it and figure out how to make automated actions on that. So, hey, here's a business rule. When this happens, I want this thing to happen because I've already decided that that's not how I want it. That's former state, or that's a bad state. I know what a good state looks like. So when this happens, I want this other thing to have happen. And Tara, I know you guys are taking advantage of that to some extent. You know, we do things for you every month on an automated basis because we've made some decisions together.
Right. That was probably one of the biggest benefits for automation, because we were spending a lot of time and money with people manually doing the work, and we freed up quite a few resources once we went through some automated tasks with you, for sure.
And your thing is, and doing work that wasn't necessarily adding value. I mean, and that's the hard part. You know, good people doing their best to do things that aren't very valuable.
Right.
and hard work. And it's hard work. And I think it's very data intensive, and that's why it's so good for automation. And TEM, but that's really, I mean, all the TEM software recognizes that and tries to address that problem.
Yeah, it does, and there's kind of an interesting anomaly in the market space, and not just in TEM, but I'll say in all associated business systems, where those systems tout automation, integration and automation, and everybody's got an API, and everybody can do all this stuff. But when you peel back a layer or two and start talking with organizations about how automated, you know, what's the degree of automation, so on and so forth, it's not uncommon to still find, you know, Bob with his spreadsheet, and to the point, not necessarily adding value to the process. There may be value in the information, but not the actual activity itself. And so, one of the guidance points that I often offer when thinking about how to automate or where to identify opportunities to create better integrations is start with a statement, and that statement is, Microsoft Excel is going to be removed from your computers and you can no longer use it. Now, where are the gaps and how do we integrate? And when you start at it, you know, from that person, thank you. And I think it kind of works, and, you know, everybody chuckles, and then everybody gets that look in their eyes like my life is coming to an end. You know, it is. It's the most scary thing out there. But the reality of the situation is that, you know, if you push hard and you're an absolute purist and you're saying automation has nothing to do with me exporting something, manipulating something, and uploading it. That is not automation. Yes, we can do it better and faster than doing a key entry, but that's not what we're talking about. And so if you force a box around it by creating a hypothesis that, you know, I don't think companies are going to do, actually take away Excel from people, but if you force that, then it really makes you sit down and say, wait a minute, what is this job function or this workflow or this handoff of data, do I need to do it? How can I do it better, different, faster, cheaper? You know what the rest of the story is. So it's a common goal and objective, and I think everybody agrees to it philosophically, but it's a matter of having the discipline to create those extreme scenarios so that you can actually get optimal benefit out of the action.
Now, Rob,
you make a good point. Sorry, Jim, I didn't mean to interrupt you. You make a really good point, because it's not about the automation. That's probably the easiest part of the whole thing. It's the adoption and the organizational change management and the culture shift for the employees. That is really the difficult part.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Tara. Yeah, I mean, and it's where we spend, you know, when all of our consulting, we get hired by IT, but we spend so much time with the communications and change management and all this stuff, because getting people to say, I see the value in changing my behavior, and I see a clear path for how to get it done. Mm-hmm. But Rob, I saw you wince when he talked about taking away Excel. Are you okay now? PTSD, you need some counseling. All right, I mean, be forward thinking in your mobile strategy. Minimum capabilities, set needed, and enablement and restricted technologies, i.e. endpoint management. So really, like thinking this beyond just this as a telephone, but as a communications device, and seeing it as part of the overall IT infrastructure, Rob. And I think, as we said before, not depending on which department owns mobility, that may or may not be even on their radar.
Mm-hmm. And it becomes so funny too, because even within mobility, and we see this so many times in so many organizations, I never understand it. Mobile, desktop owns iPads, right?
Yeah.
And mobile and Telecom has all the rest of the mobile devices, right? and what are some of the main devices I'm looking at there when I want to start to be forward thinking, right? And you have that shift that then continues again across your bridge of orders.
Yeah, they're managed so very differently from the standpoint of how they see them, whereas people use SCCM as a management tool are about restrictions, and mobile is really about enablement and just putting and making things go easier. And Tara, I know this is part of the shifted area as well, right? You've got to really change the way everybody thinks about these mobile endpoints, and that is a really hard change to make, partly because some people stake their career on it.
Yeah, and that's the reason, to Rob's point, that's the reason we have everything together in one area. So our area, IT Client Services, we manage the entire fleet for wireless, all of the desktop, all of the tablets, all the iPads. Plus now we're going to be taking on some of the more of the wired line. So we configure and work with our remote people. So it's all coming together into one space so we can manage it so much better and we can see more clear the big picture.
Yeah, Tim, I see this as the folks that are making the best process into being mature around these topics are the ones that are starting to look at endpoint and end user experience as a group, and then providing services justified or rationalized across what that user experience is. Is that too broad a statement?
No, I think that's spot on, and often when thinking about mobile strategy, I put the devices and the services into three buckets. There's the cellular devices, smartphones, maybe even flip phones, and the handhelds, and then there is the tablet laptop arena. But then the third element that I think requires a lot of consideration is the IoT devices. And what you see is that all of those elements also have a component of a fixed or a wireline network architecture. So to the point that somebody made earlier, I forget who said this, but if you have all of a sudden a bunch of new wireless devices in the environment that are Wi-Fi enabled, that places a strain on your wired infrastructure. But the strategy should address top down, and you may end up with a scenario, and we see this quite common with IoT, where the folks that are managing all those SIM cards have nothing to do with traditional telecom IT management. Maybe they're R&D, maybe they're product line managers for the widgets that their company makes, right? And so that's like a whole new universe that's out there. Yet, if you take a look at strategy from the top down, that allows you, independent of who's doing management of those different channels, that allows you an opportunity to gain, I'll say, some benefit maybe in scale, and understand where the commonalities are and where the strategy should work, for the organization, with in the royal perspective.
And I think then you're prepared when line of business comes, right? They're going to come and say, it's not thought out, right? They don't care what device it is, right? They're going to come and say, I need a loaf of bread. I don't care if it's white wheat, pumpernickel. I don't really care who's going to cook it. I don't care about any of these things.
This is what I need. My meat and cheese.
Right, and they're going to come right now and they're going to say it. And if we haven't thought about, the Wi-Fi infrastructure and we can't manage that type of Android device there again, right? You already have the answers and say, great, these are the devices you can pick from. These are where Wi-Fi will be optimized to work for you. Does that fit your business need? And you've got that checklist for them, so they don't have to go around you.
Yep, and this is, the places that I've seen that have been really most effective at enabling, not just getting in the way of all these rogue initiatives, but enabling them, have been the ones that said, we're going to put together a set of activities that allow you to be more effective with development, with security, and with cost management so that you can get going, but you have to here's the bucket of enabling technologies that are going to get there faster. So I'm not just like putting rules out there for you. I'm actually giving you the tools to go rogue and go faster. And that's, I think that covers all three of these last ones. Is just, if we're focusing on putting together the things that will let the business solve business-oriented problems, and to by creating that life cycle management, creating those cost efficiencies, creating those security tools, you can help people move forward a lot faster. So, folks, I want to turn to a question that came from the audience. Roland's asking, generally, should the efficiencies and cost reduction opportunities analysis come from the TEM vendor? And I think we'll cover this with some of our member spotlights, but in general, I know, Tara, that's been our analysis, so we'll use this to transition into Tara's conversation. So I know that's how we've approached our relationship, is that you have things that you want to see happen in your environment. We give you the tools to be able to see those things better, but we're also making suggestions on an ongoing basis. Monthly suggestions, the quarterly business review suggestions that are more long-word thinking, and then the annual kind of mobility executive briefing. That's really more about, here's the things we see going on, what things should we plan to work on together this year. Do you have a feeling of what the balance is between what you want from us as a vendor and what you think should happen internally?
Yeah, I think going into the relationship, my main goal was to not have to hardly do anything in the space, and have you manage it and tell me what the best practices are and give me suggestions on how we can, A, reduce costs, but B, better align the devices with the right areas of the company and give people options that they need in I don't want to say confined, but guide rails on where they can go and what they can do with those devices. So
I like guide rails.
Yeah, because our user base would be all over the place. I mean, we had devices that we had 3-month no usage, out a very long list of those, and we don't hardly have any of those anymore. So, and it's also about educating the end user and the leadership team as well, because they had no idea how much we were spending each month.
And that's, yeah, and I think in response to that question, I think you hit on a key element of it there, Tara, as well, as there are very tactical suggestions that it's appropriate, I would think, to work with your vendor or your partner to go through and do, right? This should be your buffer. These are your zero use. This is, get rid of these premium charges. Those are the simple things. But the other point is the visibility,
right?
Which is really going to come from your line of business. It's now giving that information to the managers about, hey, here are your top 15 highest users that you had. These people all do the same job. Why is there a $300 difference?
Right.
In their build, and those are really those behavioral cost savings that are always just going to come from giving the visibility of the information.
Yeah, and it really works together, communications task. And I know, Tim, when we hear from our customers about some of the other TEM vendors they work with, there are certainly some that you just supply the software or supply the software and help you with the reporting, but really don't give you guidance. And maybe that's one of the differentiators I think that Vox is pride ourselves on. We do make the guidance an important part of the service.
Yeah, I think, on the one hand, you can kind of look at the market and say, well, there are varying scopes of work or statements of work, and sometimes
Sure.
Enterprises say, just give me the software and I've got the brain power and the resources. That's the other key, to manage the life cycle, and that's what their choice is. I think one of the things that's kind of interesting, and this goes back to the rate of change in the market, is that I think in this case, there is a huge advantage to every enterprise to rely upon their vendor to provide guidance, insight, recommendations, whatever the scope may be, around what to do with it. Because the other challenge that I often see, and this is particularly true in large organizations or organizations with lots of different types of devices and huge volume, is that they may even have the insight into the data, but they don't necessarily have all of the what should I do with it direction,
Yep.
And so I think that because of the rate of change, relying on folks that are not just knee-deep in it and domain experts, but also knee-deep in it with lots of other companies like yours, that can be really, really helpful and insightful, and oftentimes they can bubble up, recommendations that you might not come to on your own.
Yeah, and I think that especially when we go and we make those tactical suggestions every month, Robin. But the quarterly business review, that's where our whole notion, our core focus on insight, the point of action comes into play. Is I'm not just looking at making these changes every month. We're going to create some business rules around that. But now I want to look back. I want to think about it. I want to look forward a little bit, look back a little bit, and let's think about the market and come back with some analysis. So it's not just data, information, or even just insight, but get to wisdom on it.
And the trending, and I remember years ago, Tara, a particularly terrible project you had us do, where we wanted to look back and see what the previous year would have been like if we had reduced your buffer. Do you remember that? That was a lot of fun.
And what was the outcome? What did we figure out?
I believe we kept the buffer where it was, didn't we? If memory serves.
Because there would have been too many overages at that
point.
Right,
but that's the insight then that we get to once we have the data. Then
once
we
the
can
data
make
is well formed and certainly part of what you expect from all your vendors. But then all your vendors give you your data well formed and give you some reports, but actually creating those insights is something that's have its own value. So Tara, what other so we've been working with you for a long time, and obviously you've already said today you're pretty happy with what in general what's happened. What else have we learned? And if you were talking to your colleagues out there in the Mobile Thought Leaders universe about the journey to telecom expense management, or particularly wireless expense management, what were you surprised about, and what advice would you give them on getting into this?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing I was surprised to learn, and I'm not so sure it's unique to our company or not, but and I keep going back to how important it is, but the culture change and the people aspect of adopting a vendor coming into the company and a vendor touching our data and a vendor touching our devices, that was difficult for a lot of people to let go of. But once we did, and time went on, it was much easier, and it enabled the leadership team and the individual contributors to really see the advantage of letting the experts take control of what needed to happen within the wireless space.
And that's been a consistent experience for us, isn't it, Rob? We're used to being patient because we know it takes for a while for people to get to trust, and trust is where we can actually have the biggest impact.
Yeah, absolutely. It's both unique to you and I think not to you, Tara. I think in that there are a lot of companies that it's, everyone's a contractor, everything's a managed service, and that's fine, and there's organizations that aren't. And I think, though, what you guys do an exceptional job at is really focusing on your customers, right? Your internal customers that you have, and you spend a lot of time and a great deal of concern.
They're used to an excellent end.
And making sure that communications are going out to them and that everything is done in a way in which they're comfortable. And I think that's part of the reason why you do see so much success.
Yeah.
If you slap a new software in there and tell people, you can see your expenses here, and you move on and never talking about it again, it's probably not going to be a great program.
Getting the full implementation really does. It always takes communication and change management, for sure. So we've got 10 minutes left. I want to talk about two more examples and then talk a little bit about what the product set looks like for those people that were kind of curious what that, because obviously everyone's got there's different products out there, but I think our view of it kind of aligns with everything we've been talking about here today. I did want to talk for a moment about Teva, because the interesting thing here, I won't go into it in depth, but it took a long time to get the trust and for them to say, okay, we're going to let you manage this vendor relationship with us.
Well, a long time with the right audience.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, we had to get the right audience, and all those things that Tara was speaking about, but maybe, it was even harder, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But the real thing here is that we saved them a lot of money right up front. I mean, just scads of money, easily 40%, millions of dollars, and then just as we're about to come to the end of our contract, they made a couple of acquisitions. And we had an opportunity to add those people to the environment. And while the current environment, it's hard to necessarily point to the savings, but these new acquisitions, the money we saved on the acquisitions bills was 40% with both of them. And so right away we got to be able to say, and they got to say to their management, listen, the reality is, like these guys have been telling us all along, if we stop managing this environment, within a couple of months we'll be back to overpaying by 40%. And people don't necessarily, like, why is it so hard? But if we just keep showing them examples, it's like, okay, never mind.
Because it goes back to...
We'll just cash the check and be fine with it.
It goes back to managing the program, right? If every line, if every cancellation, if every termination, it isn't a program,
right?
You have 900 zero-use phones and a drawer full of, old devices. And quarterly is not enough.
Yeah. And so, Tara, is it hard for you to rationalize the cost of the service to the rest of the organization, or is everyone pretty much on board with the value of expense management at this point?
No, it's not hard anymore. It was in the beginning, but now the manager, we send manager reports out every single month to every single manager, so there's probably, I don't know, Rob, 120-some, 130.
Yeah.
And they are very diligent at going in and looking at all of their spend because they're accountable for it, because we ultimately, wireless is one of the very few things that we do chargeback on, and they are very diligent at looking at that and making sure they're holding their teams accountable for the usage of the devices and data.
It's a good policy. I mean, people will manage it appropriately once they have the information insight.
Yeah, and one of our top customers that we have, that we get responses back, to further Tara's point, they look at them. They look at them and they ask intelligent questions.
Yeah, they really want to understand it. Yeah. They I think everyone has a basis for understanding it.
Yeah.
So they know how to ask questions. And so, Rob, I'm gonna kick it to you, Tim, here in a second. But Rob, I know this was another. We didn't get approval to put a name on this one, but I know you've been doing a lot of work with this client, casual dining restaurant. And this is an interesting one because it's got so many use cases in it, and they're growing very quickly, and there's so much money to be saved. It's not just about telecom anymore; it's about the entire picture.
And it really, to them, was the program, and the expense was just a component of it, right? And really the background here really is, as we look at minimum wage increases, how do we find efficiencies without adding people into our restaurants, right? And there became an app and a use case for tablets to help assist the current team members that they have, getting things out of the kitchen faster, getting it back, and not having to make a new hire each time. And they really came into it understanding that it needed to be a program.
Right.
I think which...
the whole thing needed to be managed together.
So many times in our business, Jim, we're convincing people that, okay, you're focused on just getting, like, the tablets out, but day two, and then there's a bill, but they really understood all of that and are having really great success by clearly identifying the success criteria up front, and that keeps them accountable and keeps Vox accountable as well, understanding the reports and what the output needs to be.
Yeah, I think it's a great example that because they came into it from the standpoint of a business use case, that they wanted to be able to consume it as a service. So the devices are as a service, and the insurance and the operations and support, and it is really the full life cycle is one thing, and we're able to optimize across the outcome, the real outcome they were looking for, and I think that is much more. And this is, I thought this would be a good lead-in for you, Tim. This is really the future of what TEM needs to look like, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that just to piggyback one thought is sometimes organizations kind of look at TEM as a one-time activity. I'm going to get it fixed, whatever the problem or challenge or issue is, and then it'll maintain. And I would argue that particularly in mobility, it's really a lifestyle change. Anybody can lose 10 pounds, but in order to keep that off, you have to have a certain regimen around that. And there's a lot of moving parts here, and so it truly and honestly is more of a life cycle approach than a one-time activity.
All right, great. Well, let's spend the last few minutes here and just quickly review kind of what goes into this holistic view from the Vox Mobile perspective. And we have a question here about some of the software vendors out there. We can talk a little bit about that as we get into it. So for us, and I'll just take this one. We look at everything we do as part of a life cycle practice within an organization. We manage the life cycle devices and apps and all the services that support both of those things. And for us, it's mostly ends up landing in these worlds of Vox Control, which is our spend management product, which includes people, process, and technology, right, Rob? And then Vox Choice, which is really the portal front end of our Encompass platform, which is where we do all of our integrations, automations across lots of systems.
And it goes back to the program too. It's reactive and proactive. So control's reactive. The bill has happened. There's things we can do to help save money next month, but it happened. The overage happened. Right. And really then we start to look at the choice component of it. That's our proactive. So who gets a device, making sure I'm having approvals, who gets these features, who don't. That's
the automation of those business decisions that we've made along the path, and giving you this really, it's really a very powerful decision engine for managing all these business cases. And we can be very prescriptive in it, but make it easier for people, and it ties into your other portals and all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So another component of this is thinking about it as being much more than just a TEM software. So I know we manage a number of software platforms on our customers' behalf as part of our Vox Control offering, because it's really a service offering. We have some of our own software, but we also do things within Telesoft and with MDSL and with Dimension Data's, is it still called Zygo, or is it Nextem? Nextem now. And we used to do Tango, not so much anymore. But all those, to the question that came in, who are the top-based TEM vendors most successful in saving large companies money for both wireline and mobility across many carriers, since we know it's the American market? Tim, I guess the thing here, when we look at this, we say insights, allocations, actions, and alternatives. Some of this is software-based, but a lot of this is our consultative approach and the activities that we provide that utilize the software and the data interchange. Am I saying that in a way that you support?
Yes. I think the analogy I often like to use is that I can go out and buy a copy of TurboTax, but that does not make me an accountant.
Right.
So I think that around the question, there's a lot of folks that have the opportunity to do that, but there needs to be equal diligence and evaluation of the services in addition to the software in itself to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, and I think we're in agreement on that. So it's really that's the differentiator, is how the service offerings provided. They all do a reasonable good job because they're all following the same rules basically. Because I know, Rob, you and I both been in all these portals. They're all good in their own ways. We would make different suggestions to different customers based on their specific needs. Mm-hmm. I know I've recommended Nextem, I've recommended MDSL, I've recommended Telesoft. Back in the day, we recommended Tango, but not so much anymore. And Tim, those are all great platforms, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they all have a purpose in the world and can certainly support a variety of needs.
But it is that I think the component maybe makes ours. Well, and I think they're all trying to do this, Rob. Is that there's reporting in there. There's access to reporting. They're integrating across multiple data sources. I mean, the great thing about ours is we can start saving you money on day one. There's no implementation cycle.
Yep.
Whereas some of these are much more robust, and we don't. Within our own software platform, we don't do the wireline stuff because it's not that much fun. Tim, am I going to get in trouble for saying it's not so much fun to save money on the wireline?
No, there's a little bit more flair on the wireless side. I'll agree with that.
All right, but Tara, it's important to you on both sides. I know you, but you use us for your wireless, but you've got a different provider for your wireline work.
Right, and we just actually formalized that not too long ago, so it's very painful on our side.
Okay. Well, and this is often what we hear, Tim, is that people are saying, hey, the wireline part or the big software platforms, they take a long time to implement. They take months to bring together, or in some cases, it takes years before they get fully implemented. I know we've got a client that kicked out one of the ones I mentioned that because it took a year to get implemented, right, Rob?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and Tim, I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Yeah, and they're really on the wireline side. There's a lot of variety on the wireless side. On wireline, the number of variables to do that is exponential, and so it can be painful and it can be challenging.
And the number of vendors you've got. Big three, big two, maybe arguably, who are offering your self-service. It's different than, you could have, I don't know.
And being smart about which ones you're going to go try to manage.
You could have 300 wireline providers easily. So.
Absolutely. And then and there's the types of assets there. And what we've found is that most companies don't have a good way of understanding what assets they have anyway and all of that, or what services they have. Right, Tim? And that's half the holdup.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so last thing I want to look at really briefly here is the things that go into our Vox Assure product. Because I think this bridges the space between Vox Control, which is about cost management, and our automation and insight product, the choice, Rob. And so Vox Assure is the acquire, the protect, and the retire parts of things. So you can go through and order a device in choice. But how you get that device, that's one of the things we see changing dramatically across our customers. It used to be I'm getting a subsidized device from the carrier. Now I'm more and more looking at various leasing opportunities that look at the net present value of that device at the end of the term.
And we know subsidies are going to be gone. We've taken them from consumers. They're going to start disappearing in your renewal contract.
Gartner came out a year and a half ago and said, hey, if you look at what the contract cost of taking the subsidies out, you're going to save money, period, end of sentence. Stop using the carriers for your supply chain. They're not good at it.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that, Tim?
No, I'd have to concur with that as well.
Then our Vox Protect product, so now it's about managing that and optimizing that asset value over the period of that term, and so adding some type of insurance and different flavors of insurance based on the cost of that asset, where it's going to be used, and what the downside risk is.
And this is, again, cheaper in your total cost of ownership, but so we say, all right, I lost my subsidy. Well, now I can't steal upgrade dates when they break one. So now, right? So now what do I do? And this is where Protect starts to come in, and it's the program's much more robust than the $10 one that your carrier was trying to sell you. It's cheaper and it's better.
Once again, they only had the one thing on the shelf, product on the shelf, as opposed to optimizing that across all the opportunities. Then retire is just getting to the place where I'm managing the end of life of that device in some programmatic way till I get back more of those devices. And I know, Tara, when we first started talking about this is a major change in operation for you. The value is there in the outcome, but you've got to make a lot lot of changes about how you think about how you contract and how we operationalize your life cycle to get to this.
Right, for sure. We're going to have a lot more discussions. That's where the change management will really come into play, especially with senior leaders and the folks that have the boots on the ground.
All right. Well, everyone's been very, very patient with me as I've worked through this. In conclusion, I think we've all agreed that this evolution of manageability services and TEM and IoT coming together is an important part of this. We do have if people are interested in learning more about how this might affect them, we talked about the management mobility assessment today, and there's a health check in there that we can do for you, and there's a link to a sample there. I believe this deck is also available for download here, so you can feel free to page through the pieces we didn't get to today. There's also a place to go look at our software demo that's online. Is that one you did, Rob? Is that you offering that demo?
Yeah.
You've got a lovely voice.
I think marketing made me do that.
Yeah.
They're nodding, yeah.
And then do check out the Mobile Thought Leaders Member Concierge page if you want to talk to some more people about that. We're definitely going to get Tara involved in that. So if you want to ask her some more questions about her journey, it's a good place to start. And thank you, everybody. Tim, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time today and your insights. A pleasure as always.
Thank you, Jim, and Rob and Tara. Enjoyed it.
And gold star for using the word Herculean, by the way. Rob, thank you so much for walking through this. And Tara, so much. Thanks for being a great client and joining us today and sharing your experience in the MTL tradition.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime. It was a good experience. Thanks.
All right. Well, everybody, once again, download the deck. There are some more things coming up. There's research to go download. We'd love to have you more involved in Mobile Thought Leaders and to engage with more of your peers. Watch this station for more information. And thanks, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll look forward to talking to you really soon. Bye now.